Welcome, and thank you all for coming to this very special event, especially on a night like this. My name is John Argo. I'm the president of the Graduate School of Management Alumni Association and an alumni. It's a great crowd we have here tonight. I want to welcome all the GSM alumni, students and business partners, and welcome our guests affiliated with the UC Davis School of Education. I'd like to let you know, take a moment to let you know what our alumni board is working on. We're working hard to extend the school's network, and we're excited about what we've accomplished so far this year in helping the school meet its strategic goals. We have a few board members here tonight. Would you stand if you're both here? Randall Fairchild and Brian Hoblet. Thanks a lot, guys. We would also love more involvement from our fellow alumni. So please don't hesitate to approach me or any one of the directors here tonight with your ideas, and let us know if you'd like to help out. One of the ways to get involved is to have your company become a GSM business partner. For a fairly modest donation, your company can enjoy many of the benefits with that program, including complimentary use of the school's working professional MBA campuses here in Sacramento and in San Ramon, and attendance at many of the terrific events we put on. Information about the business partnership program is available at our registration table. You can talk to me also, any one of the directors, or Anya Reed. Anya, are you here? She's the woman with the plan. And now it's my genuine pleasure to introduce the Dean and Professor of Management at the UC Davis Graduate School of Management, Stephen Currall. Steve?
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this event that I think will be absolutely magical tonight. This is going to be a lot of fun for all of us, and we've had a great response. We had 307 people RSVP for this, so terrific response to hear our speakers tonight. So just beginning with some thank yous. So a special welcome to our many alumni in the audience, and also we're delighted to have the sponsorship of our Alumni Association Board of Directors, who are generously hosting our networking reception after our speaker event tonight. Our event also brought to you in partnership with colleagues at the UC Davis School of Education. And we're delighted to have Dean Harold Levine here with us tonight, and our guests from the School of Education. Also, please welcome my colleague, Dean Winston Coe, Dean of the UC Davis College of Mathematical and Physical Sciences, as well as colleagues from the UC Davis Health System, the Betty Irene Moore School of Nursing Center, and the Center for Biophotonics, and others. Also joining us are many generous benefactors to the Graduate School of Management who support us financially, hire our students and alumni, and give back their time and expertise to advance the mission of the school. I want to recognize members of our business partnership program, which include many of the region's top corporations. Their generous contributions help us provide an MBA experience that's ranked among the best in the world. Our business partners with us this evening include Capital Public Radio, Comstock's Business Magazine, First Northern Bank, Five Star Bank, Genentech, Hewlett-Packard, Intel Corporation, Kaiser Permanente, ClickNation Corporation, Murphy Austin Adams Schoenfeld LLP, and Sacramento Municipal Utility District. So thank you for all the contributions that keep our Graduate School of Management a vibrant research and teaching community. So let's thank our business partners. So I also want to take this opportunity to share with you a few of the ways that we are partnering with Mayor Johnson and business leaders to help build economic prosperity here in our region. I've personally had the honor of serving as the head of the Green and Clean Technology Task Force for the Mayor's GreenWise Sacramento initiative. I'm sure virtually all of you know about this now. It's been had great publicity, and the mayor presented the report of the Greenwise Initiative at his State of the City remarks last month. He has a bold vision to transform Sacramento into the Emerald Valley, the greenest region in the country and a leading hub for clean technology. As many of you know, UC Davis is an international research powerhouse in sustainability, environmental issues, and clean tech, and working together with other institutions here in the region, we believe that UC Davis can be to the green economy what Stanford University was to Silicon Valley in information technology. As part of this effort, last April, we teamed up with the mayor to launch a UC Davis MBA Mayoral Fellows program. This program allows our MBA students to put their management talent to work in areas where public policy and business interact, including economic development, housing, education, and the arts. Our second group of students will begin their fellowships this spring. And to better prepare our graduates, this fall we'll launch a new innovative MBA curriculum. This is the most fundamental renewal of the curriculum in the school's history, and it further integrates globalization, responsible business practices, ethics, and sustainability. This new curriculum is the culmination of over 10 months of collaborative work by our faculty, alumni, students, and business leaders. This new curriculum reinforces our core strengths of values-based leadership, emphasis on teamwork, and turning ideas into action to solve strategic business issues. And a lot of these issues are tied up in the concept of leading organizational change, which is our theme tonight. So let me now move to introduction of our distinguished speakers, Mayor Kevin Johnson and Ms. Michelle Rhee. So elected in November of 2008, Kevin Johnson is the 55th mayor of Sacramento and the first African American to serve in that office. Mayor Johnson, who is a native of Sacramento, strongly believes that in order to be a great city, we must have great schools, and he's committed to identifying ways to strategically drive education reform. During the first 2 years of his administration, Mayor Johnson has accomplished a number of objectives to ensure all Sacramento students have the opportunity to attend excellent public schools. In addition to creating a formal partnership between the city and area school districts, and hosting 4 major education summits, Mayor Johnson serves as co-chair for U.S. Secretary of Education Arne Duncan's Mayor's Advisory Council and chair of the U.S. Conference of Mayors Task Force on Public Education. Mayor Johnson is a graduate of the University of California, Berkeley. His concern and passion for children and education prompted President George Bush to honor Johnson as the 411th Point of Light. 411 is still pretty good. Michelle Rhee is the founder and CEO of StudentsFirst, a national education reform organization now headquartered in Sacramento. Michelle, welcome to Sacramento. StudentsFirst is guided by Michelle's core vision to put students first. She's been working for the last 18 years to give children the skills and knowledge they'll need to compete in a changing world. Through her own experience in the classroom as a Teach for America Corps member in a Harlem Park community school in Baltimore City, she gained tremendous respect for the hard work that teachers do every day. And in 1997, Ms. Rhee founded the New Teacher Project to bring more excellent teachers to the classroom across the country. On June 12, 2007, Mayor Adrian Fenty of Washington, D.C. appointed Chancellor Rhee to lead the District of Columbia Public Schools, a school district serving more than 47,000 students in 123 schools. Under her leadership, the worst performing school district in the country became the only major city system to see double-digit gains in both their state reading and state math scores in 7th, 8th, and 10th grade over a 3-year period. Michelle currently serves on the advisory boards for the National Council on Teacher Quality, the National Center for Alternative Certification, and Project REACH of the University of Phoenix School of Education. She has a bachelor's degree in government from Cornell University, which is also my alma mater, and a master's in public policy from Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. So I know I speak for all of us when I say we're delighted to have both Mayor Johnson and Ms. Rhee here participating in this distinguished speaker event tonight. So please join me in welcoming Mayor Kevin Johnson and Michelle Rhee.
Thank you.
Well, I've got a series of questions that I'm eager to ask our two speakers tonight, and after my questions, we will then open the floor for your questions. So as we're talking, be thinking about what questions you'd like to ask the mayor and Ms. Rhee. So let me start off with two themes. I'd like to talk about the why of organizational change. In other words, what is it that, what influence in your lives have led you to be leaders of organizational change? And the second theme I'd like to explore is the how. In other words, how have you succeeded in leading organizational change efforts, and what are the principles and guidelines that the two of you have used as leaders for organizational change? It's really fascinating to observe their careers. They've worked in two sectors, namely government and public education, where organizational change is often difficult. Lots of organizational inertia that occurs in these sectors, but both the mayor and Ms. Rhee have been extraordinarily successful.
Dean, she was smart enough to get out, and I'm still stuck in.
They've been both extraordinarily successful in leading organizational change efforts, and that's really what we want to talk about tonight. And I also want to say a special thanks to the two of them. If I'm not mistaken, this is the first time that they have appeared together in Sacramento at a speaking event. So this is the first time that the dynamic duo is together on the stage. So let's thank them for that. Okay, well, ladies first, so let's begin with Michelle. Michelle, let's talk a little bit about your background and what values did your parents instill in you that led you to be interested in public education and to try to improve it. And it's especially interesting to hear your thoughts about your commitment to public education, but because in fact, much of your own personal experience has been in private education. So can you tell us a little bit about the evolution of your commitment to public education?
Sure. So I was incredibly fortunate growing up, starting from 7th grade, attended private schools, went to a country day school where there were probably 15 kids in a class. In my entire grade, there were 55 students, and that was the largest group ever to go through the school. It was an incredibly nurturing environment, very, very rigorous. You hear lots of stories about people who felt ill-prepared for college. I felt sort of over-prepared for college in lots of ways. But probably what was interesting was the fact that my father, who was a physician, was very different from most Korean men of his generation in that he was very sort of socially and civic minded. And so he used to tell us all the time when we were growing up, everything that you have and everything that you've accomplished is not because you're special at all or talented, it's because you happen to have been lucky enough to be born into this family with all of the trappings that come with it and all of the opportunities and privileges that come with that. And so the kids who are growing up in inner city Toledo who have none of what you have, it's not because they're not talented and not because they're not able and smart, it's simply because of the fact of where they were born. And it was that sort of mindset that he instilled in me from a very young age that kind of made me always think about what other people did not have access to that I did. Growing up through high school, I spent a lot of time, a high school boyfriend of mine's mother.
Now.
didn't mean anything to me, though. She was an inner city school teacher, and I remember volunteering in her classroom one day, and it was so different from anything that I had ever experienced that it just sort of inspired me and kept me coming back. And so since that point, I was really sort of captured by this thought of kids living in under-resourced, less privileged environments, not having an equal chance in life just because of the luck of their birth. And I just thought it was the most un-American thing that you could possibly imagine.
That's great. How many of you saw Michelle on Oprah back in November? Okay, that's a pretty good proportion. So I can't resist just to ask a kind of a fun question. What was the most interesting question she asked you?
What was the most interesting? So first, I'll give you a few tidbits about Oprah.
Oh, good. We're all looking forward to that.
She's really short. I don't know if you'd ever sort of realized this, but she's really short, and so when I was on the first time, she was sort of walking by, and I almost didn't notice because she was really short, and she was carrying her heels with her. That happened to be probably like 6 inches high, and so she came up and she sat down and she told the camera crew, she said, these are my 10-minute shoes. I have 10 minutes in the shoes. And so when she put them on, and they made her stand up to do a couple of shots, and she'd be standing there while they were getting the cameras ready, and she'd say, 9 minutes.
8 minutes?
Yeah, exactly. So that's my tidbit about Oprah. I think the most exciting thing about me being able to be on the show was just the fact that she feels incredibly passionately about public education, and she's decided to take this issue on. She said to me when I was on the show, and they turned to a clip where the National Teachers Union president was speaking about something. She looked at me, she's like,
that must have been interesting.
yeah, she said, you are going to get me in so much trouble. And I think I did proceed to do that.
That's why we want you here tonight. You may have a little bit of controversy as well. So, well, that's fun. It's fun to hear about that. I didn't know she was that short. They say the same thing about Tom Cruise. I don't know if you ever met Tom Cruise. Mayor Johnson, we're eager also to hear about the development of your values as well. So can you say a little bit about your upbringing and experiences or people in your life that instilled in you the values that then led you to be committed to government service and to public education as well?
Yeah, I grew up in the Oak Park community, not too far from here. And I'm a product of public schools. I went to one elementary school, one middle school, one high school, and one public university. And what I had in my neighborhood in Oak Park that other kids did not have was a stability of a family environment. I lost my dad when I was 3 years old. He had drowned in the river. And my mom was a single parent. But my grandparents immediately stepped in, so I was the beneficiary of 3 parents. I had a mom, a grandmother, and a grandfather in the Oak Park community. And my grandfather was a sheet metal worker, and very blue collar, strong work ethic, very structured. But the thing that I remember most about my grandfather was just this commitment of helping out in the community, being a good neighbor, making a difference in the community. My grandmother on the other side was very gracious, and she was a person that always made sure I did thank you notes when you got a gift. And if I didn't do it, I'd have to sit at the table and couldn't eat or go out and play. So just the giving to the community and also being thankful and appreciating what you get were 2 very strong influences for me as a young person. I got a scholarship from Sacramento High School to UC Berkeley, and this is where Michelle and I differ a little bit. She went to private schools the majority of her life. I got to college, she was over-prepared, and I got to college, and for the first time I realized I was underprepared, that I did not get a good education growing up, where I thought I did. I got A's and B's the whole time. I actually skipped 5th grade. So, I mean, how much smarter can you be than that? You skipped it. I skipped a whole grade. So, did you skip a grade?
Look, I have to tell this story.
Okay, wait. Here's how this relationship works.
We somebody threw an engagement party for us, and at the engagement party they found sort of tidbits about each of us. So they would read the tidbit, and then the crowd would have to guess, was it him or me? And so when they got to this one, they said, skip the 5th grade, and everyone yelled, Michelle! And he was like, no, it was me!
So when I got to UC Berkeley, I was in a freshman English class. And I remember the teacher, the professor, asking these students a question. And the question was, to the students, can you describe a euphemism? And there were 30 kids in the class, and all 29 all knew exactly what a euphemism was. And I was like, so I'm looking at my little course schedule, and like, am I in the right class? And it was Frost English, beginning. And I didn't know what a euphemism was. And I realized at that point in time that I did not get the quality education that a lot of other people got up and down the state of California. And I made a commitment that if I was ever successful enough, I was going to go back to my community that I grew up in and not only make sure that kids knew what euphemism meant, but made sure that they had access to really good schools. And that's really what kind of brought us together, this commitment of trying to eradicate the inequalities that often occur in public education. And when I got into the MBA, my first year in the league, I knew I wanted to come back to Sacramento and do something in my neighborhood. And I figured I'd start an after-school program called St. Hope, committed to just education for young people in our community. And the reason why I started it is during the summer of my senior year of college and my first year in MBA, I realized when I went back to my community, all my friends were in jail, on drugs, or dead. And those who weren't dead had kids. And you can see the cycle just starting to repeat itself over and over. So my whole commitment, and this is in fact why I ran for mayor, is I wanted to disrupt this cycle and to make sure that kids in underserved communities have access to really good schools and do know what the word euphemism means.
That's a great story, very interesting. The two of you have very similar commitments and very similar values, but from radically different beginnings. So, and Kevin, your comments about public education resonate with me as well, because I'm a product of public education. I went to public schools all the way up to college, and had a great experience there, and so it's really a worthy commitment. One of the things that I think is so interesting about tonight and about having Kevin and Michelle here is the individual stories that they have and all they've accomplished individually yet separately, but also the dynamic and the chemistry between them, which we've already seen a little bit of. And let me then move on to my next question, and that is, how do the two of you help each other be better leaders? Okay, so the motivation behind this is that my wife is a professional person as well, and an Asian woman, so I'm kind of partial. So, and she helps me a lot, actually, in my work, and I help her. And I'm just curious about the conversations that the two of you have about different leadership or organizational change issues that you might be confronting, because in each other you have an amazing coach to help each other in these. So Michelle, what observations have you had in the way that the two of you have helped each other?
I think that one way that we are very different, and one way that the mayor's helped me tremendously, is I'm very impatient, and I don't like uncertainty, and so my personality is such that when I'm faced with a situation, I want to make a decision very quickly, and I want to move and be done with it, and then move on to the next thing. So very, one step after the other. And one of the things I think that he's helped me with is being okay with uncertainty a little bit more, and taking a little bit more time in making decisions. And it's not a natural thing for me. It makes me feel uncomfortable. But I've had a number of situations where he's sort of said, okay, let's just wait a second and think for a little while. And I'm sitting here like this, twitching, and it turns out that the next day or the day after, something will come to one of us that we never would have thought of, at that moment, that has allowed me to make a better decision and have a better outcome overall. And so that has been extraordinarily helpful to me.
Interesting. Kevin?
Let's see. I think that we really complement each other in many respects, but it is pretty neat to be able to come home and at the end of the night, you come together talking about what you both are so passionate about, which is education. So when she downloads her day, it's about a topic I care a great deal about, and when I'm talking about my day, it's usually about a topic she cares a great deal about, as long as I'm not talking about council meetings. But I think where she's been probably most helpful for me are two concrete things. We met in Washington, D.C. at a Teach for America conference. It was a 10-year, 15-year anniversary. And we ended up having a relationship. She ended up sitting on my board in Sacramento for St. Hope. And I think most of you know the work and the success that we've had at Sac High and PS7, but she was a board member, and she came in and she brought people to our board from around the country that would have not otherwise come to Sacramento. So her ability to attract talent and get people to buy into the mission that we had in Oak Park was very helpful. And then the second thing, which is a little bit funnier, she's saying, you heard her say that she's impatient, and I always get accused of being really impatient in Sacramento. But there's times I interview people and I say, that's a really nice person. They should make the next round. And she's like, no, gotta go. And I'm thinking like, well, what do you mean? Are you trying to hire a nice person, or you want somebody who's gonna get results, is what she says. And I'm like, I want a nice person who can get results. That nice person is not going to get you results. So the point of it is, she has a really high bar on talent. And it gets into your organizational theme of change. It's really about attracting leadership, human capital at a really high level. And because she travels around the country, she's very impatient in terms of bringing people on board that she does not think can deliver at a really high level. That's no different in a business. You bet on a management team, you bet on leadership. That has been her strength for me, and been one that has allowed me to be a little bit more, what the right word is? You normally finish my sentences. Discerning. Being a little more discerning in terms of who we bring on board. Thank you.
Well, that's a great transition to another question I wanted to ask, and that was really about human capital decisions, choosing colleagues, team members, other leaders, and with an eye toward people who are going to be your allies in advancing the mission of your organization and advancing organizational change activities and efforts. So Michelle, can we explore a little bit more deeply? So it sounds like you are very intuitive, and you are able to draw judgments in a very efficient way. Are you able to reflect on how it is that you do that, and what are the criteria that you tend to look at when you're making decisions about bringing someone on board?
So first, you should know that over the 20 years of my career, I've probably, recruited, meaning hired and fired more people than most people ever will in a lifetime. That was what I did. My job was hiring people, because I ran an organization called the New Teacher Project, and what we did was hired thousands and thousands of people a year to teach in public school districts across the country. So this is sort of my thing. My staff used to make fun of me that I would have the 7-minute interview, that I knew within 7 minutes whether somebody was going to make it or not. And then they'd say, could you just please be nice for the last 23 minutes of the interview and not make the person feel like you knew exactly what was going to happen when they walked in the door. I think some of it is intuitive, but there are a couple of things that I look for in any position that I'm hiring for, from an office manager all the way up through a president of an organization that I'm running, and that is One, that I need somebody who's very goal-oriented, somebody who measures their success based on measurable goals, and also someone who can talk about how they have persevered through challenges to get on the other side. So in my business, nothing is easy. You're going to have roadblocks everywhere, and the extent to which a person can work beyond those roadblocks and constantly be thinking about a different angle to take is incredibly important. I think as a leader, I have many faults and things that I'm not good at. But one of the things that I think I am good at and is sniffing out talent. And I always am looking to hire people underneath me who are a lot smarter than I am. And because my job is not to be the smartest person in the room, my job is to block and tackle for all of the smart people so that they can do incredible work. And so one of the things I always pride myself on is finding people who are unbelievably talented and assembling a great team and then knocking down all the barriers so they can do their jobs.
Yeah, I think that's great. Those are fascinating reflections, and it resonates with me because I think my job is to ensure that other people can do their jobs and flourish in their jobs. So that makes a lot of sense to me. So Kevin, what about your thoughts when we already talked a little bit about how you see things differently, but what are your thoughts and what are your criteria when you think about bringing someone on board your team and your organization? And is there anything specific about being in government service that, say, differs from what Michelle does in her work in public education, or are things really more generic and there are more commonalities across those?
I think there's a lot of commonalities, and I think, again, for me, thinking about our discussion today, I want to think about, like, what are my core beliefs and my core values? And my 4 or 5 are, one, I believe that every kid is special. I don't care who it is. That's a core belief I have. Another one would be I have a tremendous, a goal to really focus on results, so very result-oriented. Another one would be relentless pursuit of excellence. Just that commitment of excellence. Another, I'm a fanatic about details. Things need to be done a certain way, and that's really important to me. So when I think about hiring people, I want people that embrace those core values. And because I played sports in my other life, I want somebody who's competitive. I want somebody who's got great energy and is very competitive. They know what the goal is. They know how to play and be a part of a team. And they want to be held accountable for outcomes, whatever those are. And when you think about, in business school, you have, the three, the triangle of success. You have relationships, results, and process. I can give a
Diagram?
Who?
A diagram?
I don't care a whole lot about process.
Oh.
So I'm really focused on results. But as an elected official, relationships is so important. Right. So I've had to learn to, is temper my commitment for results, or at least find a way to make that compatible with this notion of relationships to get to where we need to be. So at the end of the day, I think my job is to articulate a shared vision and then have people who believe in those goals, deeply invest in those goals, can take a plan, execute it, and are going to constantly reassess on whether or not we're getting there. But it's really about accountability. If people don't want to be held accountable, it's just not going to work. We're not ones where we don't make excuses for what we do. If it works out, you pat each other in the back and you give somebody else credit. And if it doesn't work out, you say, I didn't do my job well enough. And that's the kind of people you want to work with on a regular basis.
He is much more of an optimist. He has this incredible belief in people, that he wants to believe the best in people. And so it's interesting because we'll have conversations all the time where somebody will have messed up however many times, and then they'll come to him and have this big story about how going forward, it's going to be different. And he'll come out and say, okay, yes. And I'm like, are you kidding, honey? Because for me, it's sort of, you cut your losses and you move on. And, for him, he just wants to believe that what that person is saying is really going to turn everything around. But that's one of the things that I actually appreciate most about him. He is such an optimist. He so sort of believes in people's desire to want to do well, that he kind of wants to create an environment where everyone can be successful too.
Steve, tell them what your mom said about you growing up being liked. This is fun.
So, my first year on the job in DC, in the first 100 days, we decided to close 23 schools. And it was literally, I mean, if you want to become the most unpopular person in a city really quickly, all you have to do is say you're closing a school, much less 23. It had never been done at that scale before. And so, we announced we were going to do this, and the city went ballistic. And so my mother was there during all of this. And, one day she sort of, wakes up and she opens the newspaper. There's a two-page spread with a map of the city pinpointing all of the schools that I was closing. She turns on the TV, and there are people picketing outside of my office and yelling and screaming at me. And so I came home that night after all these community meetings. It was 11 o'clock at night. She's like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." She said, "It's so interesting. When you were young, you never cared what other people thought about you. And I always thought that you were going to grow up to be antisocial." She said, "I see now that this is serving you well." So that's just a little insight into the way that my particular brain works. I guess I've always been that way, though.
Fascinating, fascinating. So one of the topics that I'm personally interested in my research is the role of trust in the workplace and trust in leaders. So what are your reflections on how to build trust, how to maintain trust, how to repair trust if trust is damaged? So what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about that, Michelle?
So my good friends and I have a saying. We always say to each other, trust is the basis of any relationship. And I think that's absolutely right. You have to have faith and trust. It was interesting because as I was working in the job in DC, oftentimes people would come and say, "Well, we don't believe in you. We don't believe that you want the right things, X, Y, and Z." And I said, "Great. You know what? You should probably go somewhere else and work then." Because I don't think that anyone ever wants to be in a position where they are working for someone that they don't have full faith and confidence and trust in. Now, that doesn't mean you have to agree with everything that the person agrees with or believes or anything like that, but you fundamentally have to trust folks and believe in the people that you're working for. I think that in DC, one of the, we sort of fell into this trap of underestimating the power that the media had in what we were doing every day. So we were operating, we sort of put our noses down, we sort of thought, okay, if we are doing the right things and producing results, then people will see those results and like them and want more. But what we underestimated was the fact that there were sort of these stories that would come up in the media all of the time, and they were often sort of about the conflict and the controversy and that sort of thing. And we used to read those things like, oh, no one's really going to believe that, and we didn't do a good job of actually sending out any kind of different messages. So then the messages that the sort of media was creating or the dynamics that they were creating were the ones that stuck in people's heads. And that was a shortcoming on our side and my side as a leader, because we kind of abdicated responsibility of the communications to the media, and we did not proactively go out and communicate with our employees on a regular basis to say, actually, that's not what the story, this is what we're trying to do, and this is why we're doing the things that we're doing. Repeating that message over and over again, we very much underestimated just the power of that communication, or the lack thereof. And so, you know, whenever people ask me, well, you know, what would you do again, or what advice would you give to people who are trying to do what you're trying to do, you know, my biggest piece of advice is that when you're talking about the kinds of change that we were trying to enable in the district, which was really transformational change, it was a sea change, that you have to have very clear, very consistent and constant communication out about what it is that you're doing, why you're doing it, and what you're hoping to accomplish through those actions.
Mayor?
Yeah, I'll just build on what she's saying. When you think about how many students in here are part of the MBA program here at UC Davis? So you guys are all reading about this, or you read about it. I mean, there's different kind of leaders, and I feel like I'm more into the transformational leader category. That's kind of my mentality, the aspiration, the vision, and taking on a challenge. And part of it is you have to attract people that also want that environment. It's a little more entrepreneurial, high risk, high reward. That's not for everybody. So now that I'm in the public sector environment, it's the opposite of that. You know, it's process, it's about consensus, it's about let's plan the plan and then plan a little more and then talk about the plan and then put the plan on a shelf and then start all over, and then there's a new election cycle and then you pull the plan off, and you know, and that's just a different environment when you want results. And so when I think about my work as an athlete, first of all, and I'll give two, as an athlete, when you play good team defense, you cannot in the NBA guard a player by yourself. They're just too good. You rely on your teammate to help you. So you commit to a system. If I force a guy left, my teammate is going to help out. That's a commitment that you have to have, which gets to trust. You can't do it as a single person. Mm-hmm. So if you fast forward to the school environment, going back to being a transformational leader, if you lay out on the front end what you expect and what you're trying to do, that will attract people, and they want to do that. And it's very clear on the front end. So let me give you an example. If we say we're willing to take on the status quo and we're going to start a new organization from the ground up, if you don't have an entrepreneurial spirit, if you don't realize that every day is going to be a little different, it's not predictive, if you want a stable environment, then that's not the right environment for you. So when we lay out for teachers, thinking about just commitment of trust, we tell teachers that you're not going to be a normal teacher in this environment. You have to be more than a teacher, because when you're in an underserved community, you're gonna have to work longer hours, you're gonna have longer school days, you're gonna have to take your cell home at night. Now, if you don't wanna do that, then this is not the school for you. Mm-hmm. Most teachers say they wanna do it, and some do it for about 2 weeks and like, I don't wanna do this. But at least we were forthright and very clear on what the expectation was in the very beginning. What that does, though, it starts to create an environment that people feel like you have been in the trenches together, because you're doing more, you're working harder, you're challenged, your mountain is steeper. That attracts a certain mindset of people, and I think when you're a transformational leader, those are the people and the challenges that you want, and that trust is critically important to accomplish anything. So whether you're playing sports, whether you're running schools like we have done in the past, or even in the public sector, I'm still trying to figure out how to do it there. I haven't quite figured it out yet, but we're working on it.
I'm interested in how the two of you have dealt with the inertia of the organizations in which you run, in which you operate. So, Kevin, you were just talking about the bigger focus on process in government. So, how do you, and Michelle, you were talking about the influence of the media and how that was very strong and somewhat relentless. So, how do you avoid those forces sort of rubbing the edges off of you in a negative way, where you start to lose your energy, where you start to lose your commitment? And do you consciously have to think about resisting those forces that sort of sap your energy and your commitment? and your entrepreneurial focus from you?
Let me give the context, and then you can feel free to answer the question. Is that okay? I gotta get permission. So, Dean, we were in Aspen, Colorado together a month after we met. And you had the top reformers at the Aspen Institute, 40 of them in a room. And we all were on the outside of the public sector. We ran nonprofits and different organizations. You had Arnie Duncan at the time, who was in charge of schools in Chicago before he became Secretary of Education. Cory Booker was a council member, the founder of Teach for America, the founder of KIPP Schools. We're all in the room, and these are the top reformers in the country. And we met for 3 days, and we talked about how we're going to change the world. And at the end of 3 days, it became very clear that we were just going to go back to our respective communities and keep doing what we were doing, but not really change the world. And I remember I got a chance to make a closing comment, and my closing comment was, if people in this room really want to make a change, we should do 2 things. One of us should go back and become a superintendent or a chancellor inside the system, because you've got to take the things you do in the private sector that work and take those. This system can't change itself from within. You needed to take folks on the outside and put them inside. So that was a chancellor or a superintendent. And somebody else needed to go back and become a mayor of their city. The irony of that discussion, she and I were the ones that did that. She went and became a chancellor in DC, and I became a mayor. And I think she can get at a little bit of why we think that's important, especially in terms of consensus, which I'll let you kind of throw out here.
When I started my job in DC, about probably, 5 or 6 weeks in, I remember I was driving home one night, it was raining, and my cell phone rang, and I looked at my phone, and it was a call from Joel Klein, who was the chancellor of the New York City Public Schools at the time, and he was the one who had referred me to the mayor of DC, so he'd sort of gotten me into the whole job to begin with. So I pulled over to the side of the road, and I pick up the phone, and he says, okay, Michelle, I am going to give you 2 pieces of advice. I said, okay, let her rip. And the first thing he said, so first of all, do you have a boyfriend? And I said, no, I don't. At the time, I didn't. And he said, okay, so my first piece of advice is go out and get one. And I said, sir? And he said, because let me just tell you that this job is the loneliest job you could possibly imagine. And unless you have someone at home every night that you come home to at the end of the night who says to you, honey, you're not the crazy one. They're the crazy ones. You're just fine. He said, unless you have that kind of emotional support every night when you go home, you're never going to make it. So go get yourself a dating life. That was the first thing that he said. And I never thought in my entire life that I would be getting love life advice from Joel Klein, but there I was. And so after that, I said, okay, so what's the second piece of advice? And he said, the second piece of advice is you have to lead from the front. And he said it in such a definitive way that I said, okay, thank you, sir. And I hung up the phone, and I get back on the road, and I'm like, I have no idea what that means. I had no idea what that guy's talking about. And it wasn't actually until a few months later that I was going through the whole school closure process, where literally people would be picketing outside of my office every day. Everyone on the TV, radio, you name it, was sort of criticizing me. And I realized that this is what he was talking about, because a year after all the school closures were done, a woman came up to me at a community meeting, and she said, do you remember me? Look, she said, I was the one that was always yelling at you all the time with the school closures.
You said, which one?
Yeah, I was like, oh no, I remember you. And she said, I just wanted you to know that you were right. I couldn't see it at the time because it was such an emotional process and we didn't want the school to close, but you were right. We're in a better school now. We have more resources. The kids are getting a better education. So good job. And I thought, okay. See, so I realized that leading from the front means that if you get mired in sort of the, trying to make everybody happy all of the time and trying to keep the noise levels to a minimum, the likelihood that you're actually going to move anything is not high. Sometimes you have to be able to see things that other people can't see maybe at that point, but you know it's the right thing to do. You have to get out in front and you have to lead people to that, and eventually, if you're making the decisions for the right reasons, then people will come along to that. And so, you know, I think in any situation where you're trying to really crack open things that have been in place for a long time, change doesn't come easy. You know, as much as people say they want change, it's only until you actually start to change their lives and they're like, wait, not so much. And so, you know, when you're in the middle of that, realizing that there's something on the other side, and so kind of keeping your core of what you know is good and right is important.
I think you have to. You remember year 2 speech that you wanted to give about consensus?
Yeah.
Tell him that one real quick.
See, he's going to get me in trouble.
You're in Sacramento. It's better you get in trouble than me.
So I was after my first year on the job, for 1 year I sort of had given my standard stump speech, and I was heading into year 2 of the job, and I sort of thought, okay, well, I have to change up my speech. I can't continue to give the same speech over and over again. He said, so well, just think about your first year and what your biggest lessons were, and then just, you know, give a speech about that. And so I was trying to think about, okay, what are my biggest lessons learned? And the sort of first thing that came to my head was consensus and cooperation is overrated. So I decided to try it out, and I gave my first speech of the second year, and I was like, consensus, collaboration, and cooperation are overrated. And then that was all that was in the media the next day. Rhee says collaboration overrated. But what I actually meant by that was that in the public schools, collaboration became the end game. Right? So what everybody became focused on was, how can we all get along and keep all the adults happy? And it was this, it created this environment where literally, when I started in DC in 2007, 8% of our 8th graders in the city schools were on grade level in mathematics, 8%. If you were to have looked at the performance evaluations of the adults in the system at the same time, you'd have seen that 95% of the adults were being rated as doing an excellent job. How can you have a system where all of the adults are running around thinking they're doing great work when what we're producing for kids is 8% success? And it was because the culture and the environment was such that we all wanted to feel good about ourselves. We want to pat each other on the back. Aren't we doing a good job, right?
And so it's totally about process.
Yeah, so
totally.
All of the adults were happy with the system, even though it was completely failing kids. And that was my point, was that, you know, we can all get along, and in my mind, we for far too long in public education have been willing to turn a blind eye to what is happening every day to children in classrooms in the name of harmony amongst adults. And that has to stop. We have to be okay with adults feeling a little uncomfortable with things so that we can actually change the system and provide kids with what they deserve.
So just to add on to that, we know from research literature that there is a functional amount of conflict. You can either have too little conflict, which is the situation you're describing, or too much, of course, and either one is pathological to the organization. So it's very interesting to hear your experience. Kevin, your thoughts, further thoughts on, you're obviously a very energetic, entrepreneurial mayor, but there are pressures that must come to bear that make it more difficult on you to retain that energy and that spirit. So are you mindful of those, and do you have a mechanism for resisting that kind of pressure?
Yeah, I mean, again, thinking about your audience, especially the students that are in business school, if you get involved in public sector, it's just different rules of the game. It's not the same that you would do in the private sector. You don't have the ability to be super entrepreneurial, make a decision and go for it and look at the bottom line. It's about process, it's about relationships, it's about how many people did you talk to. It's often about making somebody else feel like it's their idea, so they can own it and feel good about it. And that's just not something that I was used to. It was like, you know, I played team sports. The goal is to make everybody around you better, but you want to win. One simple example, this is how simple basketball was. In the NBA, when I played for the Phoenix Suns, our goal at the beginning of the season was just this. win 15 playoff games. That was it.
Does that mean you're champs if you win?
Absolutely. It's just that simple. If you win 15 playoff games, that's all you need. So everything we did in training camp, in preseason, in November and December was all working toward a playoff where you need to win the 15 games. If you won 3 in the first round, 4 in the second, 4 and 4, that would make you an NBA champ. So when you had conflict amongst your teammates or people who didn't want to go along with the program, our coach would say, is that going to help us win 15 games in the playoffs? And at that point, you realize everything else doesn't really matter. Well, in the public sector, it doesn't, to her point, it's not even about results half the time. That's been the most frustrating part. You know, I ran for mayor because I want Sacramento to be a cool city. I want it to reach its potential. I wanted streets to be safe and good schools and create jobs and all those things that we believe so strongly in. The results at the end of the day are not what drive the decisions that we make in the city of Sacramento. And that was, to me, probably the most profound lesson I've learned in the 2 years that I've been mayor.
You know, I warned him of this. When he told me he was thinking about running for mayor, this was before we were started to see each other and we were just friends, and he said, I'm thinking about doing this. And I said, are you crazy? This is so not what you want to do given your personality, because he's very results oriented. He wants to just make a decision and have it, you know, carried out and then go. And that's not how government works. And so when he first told me that he wanted to do this, I thought there's nothing, no job that is sort of a worse fit for your personality than that. But
She was right.
But I tell you, like, what drives him so much is he loves this city. He loves Sacramento. I mean, you know, he'll tell you the stories about how, you know, people teased him all the time when they'd come to Sacramento in the NBA, that it was one of the worst cities to go to and all. He loves Sacramento. He wants this city to reach its potential, and so that's where he gets his energy every day. I mean, despite the fact that he's not able to necessarily do all the things that he wants to do on the time frame that he wants to do it on, his energy is sort of endless for wanting to just, you know, make the city the best it can be.
So he has a very clear superordinate goal that dominates his behavior and his actions, even if the organization in which he operates does not have a single superordinate goal.
Definitely.
And then my job in year 2 and 3 now is to try to figure out how to get 8 other council members to participate in this shared vision with key priorities, with performance matrix that lead to results that are more important. And we're making progress, but that's just not what I expected. I thought it would be entirely different, but I was clearly wrong. And once again, she was right, but.
So I'll ask one last question, and then we'll invite you all to ask your questions or make your comments. But I'm interested in, as Michelle, as you look at reforming public education and public school districts, and Kevin, as you think about our region and trying to take it forward, and you both think about organizational change, how do you decide what to change and what to leave alone? Because you can't change everything. Some things you have to leave in place. And how do you differentiate between what has to be left in place versus what to go after and really allocate your time and effort to? So how do you decide which levers to pull and which to leave alone?
That's a good question. And one that we faced when I took over the school system in DC, because everything was broken. Literally everything needed to be fixed. And so the question was, what do you do, and how and when? And for me, the sort of primary thinking that we went through is, okay, there's an order of operations. So, for example, lots of people would say to me, well, how come you never tried to lengthen the school day? Why you were so focused on teacher quality, you know, and making sure that you had the right teachers and principals in place? Why didn't you try to extend the amount of time that kids were in school? And I would say, well, because you have to make sure that what's happening in the classroom is good first, because more crappy teaching is not going to help any kids, right? So you have to make sure you've got the right people doing the right things in the classroom first, and then more of that is going to have a benefit. But if you try to pull the wrong levers, or in the wrong order, it's actually not going to produce the results that you need. And so part of what we had to think through was, what's that order of operation? And I think that's, when you're talking about systems that are as wholly dysfunctional as the one that we saw, it was a careful balance between seeing as much change as you wanted to on a quick enough time frame, but not disrupting the entire system so that people couldn't actually operate or didn't know what was happening or what was expected of them.
Very, very interesting to hear that and see a parallel between what you just described and what I face in leading a business school, because people often ask me these questions. Well, where do you intervene? What do you focus on first? What are your priorities? And the answer is the faculty. So to the extent that I can continue to build great faculty in the Graduate School of Management, a lot of other things follow from that. So there's many things we can focus on in terms of admissions and student placement and alumni relations. All those things are important, but there is, at least in my mind, a hierarchy of where am I going. If I allocate my effort, this is where I'm getting the most bang for the buck. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to focus on faculty quality, and just recently we were ranked number 3 in the world in faculty quality by The Economist magazine. So we've been very successful over the years in hiring and developing great faculty. So Kevin, what are your thoughts in terms of how you prioritize? What do you go after versus what do you leave alone in terms of effectuating change?
I think looking at it from a regional standpoint, I think was partly your question. One of my challenges, I would go back to Washington, I would hear where the president would want to go and where his agenda was. And I'd come back and I'd realize that no one in our region heard it. So one of the things I had to do in year 2 is bring more people out so they can hear. It's like going on a field trip, exposure, getting experience, so that when I started talking about a vision or where we would go, people would say, yes, I heard it, I see where we're trying to go. So when President Obama said that during this economic challenges that we're having, if you want stimulus dollars in your community, those communities that work together as a region are going to get more dollars. Well, when I was able to come back and then bring people out and then they heard it, it made sense for it was in our self-interest as a region to create a regional economy, to collaborate as a region. And then you come up with a couple proof points that our region understands that we'll be much better and much stronger working as a region. That was something that was easy to do after the president said it. The other point was I realized that Sacramento, when you think about our region, we're looked at as the bully because we're the big capital city, and whatever we do in Sacramento, we usually do it without respect to the other cities. So one of the things I had to do early on is go out to, whether it be Woodland or Winters or Yuba or Roseville, go out to those communities and say, I don't have the answer. What's important to you and how can we work together? So I'm doing all the things that Michelle says she's not a big fan of, which is consensus, cooperation, and collaboration. I realize that in this public sector, it just will not work without doing those type of things. So you got to find a balance. That's been my challenge, but it's also been very rewarding. My personality is more executive. I want to make a decision and get something done. You've got to be legislative as well, especially in our governance structure, the one we have. And I think as a region, we've made a lot of strides, with your help in the Greenwise initiative. If we look at Davis as being a separate city on the other side of the causeway, our region loses. But if we look at the Sacramento region to include Davis and El Dorado and Roseville and Elk Grove, we are so much stronger when we fight as a region. And I think you've seen a lot of that progress in the last couple of years, because there's not one initiative that I've done in the last 2 years that has not been a regional initiative. And I think council members and mayors in some smaller cities have appreciated that because they've been able to contribute in a real way.
No, I think you've been very successful at that, actually, and I've heard you repeat that theme over and over again. We certainly saw that in Greenwise because you reached out to the entire region, and we did feel like it was a broader regional effort. And I think that's a very wise tactical thing to do, because you're in a situation where you have very little you cannot rely on hierarchy in the way that you deal with Roseville. I mean, you don't really have any authority or jurisdiction over them. You have to use influence and pull them along and help, and as you were saying before, bring people, say, to Washington to help them catch the vision, to educate them about the vision, to order to try to get people to converge with you on that vision. So I think you've done that incredibly well, and I think it's been received very well by the entire region.
Dean, can I say one thing for your students here? I think it's important. So as much as I'm trying to collaborate, cooperate, and create consensus, at the end of the day, sometimes you do still have to put your foot down. So let me give you an example. The Greenwise initiative was called Greenwise Sacramento. Mm-hmm. And people around the region didn't want to call it Sacramento. Right. So then I had to put on my other hat at that point and get people to understand that you may not like it, but this is the Sacramento region. And if you want to go back to Washington, if we have a no-name region, it's not going to mean a whole lot to folks. But if our region is the capital of California, it would serve us well. So in that room full of, say, 50 people, we might have had 2/3 of the people supportive and a third not, and that was okay. So I guess to the students out here, you're not always going to get everybody exactly where you want, but at least if it's founded in being fair and listening and rationale and logic that people can appreciate, that's still enough. You know, sometimes a majority plus one is enough to get things done.
Well, that's the balance between cooperating and partnering and those, but at some point decisions have to be made and you have to exert leadership. Okay, so I hope you've been thinking about your questions during this very interesting dialogue that we've had. So can I invite you to go to the microphone, please, and to identify yourself, and let's hear your question. Rick, would you like to start us? There's a green light. That looks encouraging.
Okay. My question is for...
Can you identify yourself, please?
Yes. I'm Rick Fowler, president of the Community College Foundation, and thanks to the good graces of Dean Harold Levine, chair of the UC Davis School of Education Advisory Board. Yesterday, I was at the Los Angeles Unified School District and was told that they had a $400 million budget cut next year and would be laying off 7,000 people. And in light of the comments that I've heard tonight, I was thinking about asking Chancellor Rhee if she feels that the governance model of a school district that has evolved so differently in so many different places is up to the challenges of what has to be done today. Thank you.
So the quick answer is no. I think that when you are talking about systems that are as low performing and as dysfunctional as a Washington, D.C. or an LA Unified, a school board structure is not going to work. You have 9 different people with 9 different agendas, all who have their own local elections to worry about, many of whom are using that as sort of a stepping stone into greater office, et cetera, who are together trying to make decisions about policy. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and is not going to get you at the end of the day to where you need to go. I'm a huge believer in mayoral control of low-performing school districts. I think that you've got to, at the end of the day, have one person who's ultimately accountable for what happens or doesn't happen in the district. And without an executive, to the dean's point, whose job is on the line, who's going to make those decisions, I don't think that you can get anywhere. And the situation that you're describing is a situation that every school district across the country will be facing in the next few months, which is that there's an ongoing budget crisis, there are jobs that are going to be cut, and the way that we lay off teachers in this country is absolutely insane. We utilize a policy called LIFO, last in, first out, which means that the last person hired is the first person fired, regardless of how good they are or aren't. So those decisions are made with no regard to how good the person is in the classroom. And this has 3 incredibly negative impacts on kids. One, the research shows that you end up firing some of the most highly effective teachers in the district. I mean, that makes no sense. The second is that you end up having to lose more jobs because the most junior teachers are paid the least amount of money. So in order to close the budget deficit, you actually have to fire more people, lose more jobs. And the third is that it disproportionately negatively impacts the lowest performing schools. Because the higher performing schools in affluent areas of the city, that's where everybody wants to go, and once you get a job there, you stay there forever. So they have very few new teachers. Whereas the schools in the inner city, in Watts, for example, have 50% of their staff are new teachers, and those schools are decimated by the budget cuts, and the affluent schools are untouched. This policy makes absolutely no sense for children or for schools. But for decades, this is how we have been doing business, because you essentially have a situation right now where you have management, right, the school board, who are usually elected through the support of union dollars. So you have union on both sides of the bargaining table, right? That is never going to get you a contract that is going to put kids first and foremost. And I think that if we want to change the policies to be focused on what is best for children, you have to change that dynamic.
So is your recommendation then that the composition of school boards is the problem, or is it the way that they get elected? So separate those for us. Help us understand. So if you were to change the governance system, how would you do it?
Well, I don't think that you could run the business school by committee, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. I think that anyone knows this as an organization. In order to have a functional organization, not that you're not going to get input, not that you're not going to get lots of insights from different people, but at the end of the day, you have to have one boss, one decision maker.
And the superintendent does not fulfill that role?
No. The superintendent in a school board run district, the superintendent will tell you, if they're being honest, that they spend 60 to 70% of their time just trying to play politics amongst their school board. See, if they want to implement a new policy, they're trying to figure out how they're going to get 5 votes. And they're jockeying and they're horse trading and this sort of thing. In the mayoral control system, when I wanted to implement a new initiative, I'd go to the mayor and say, "Sir, this is what we're going to do," and he'd say, "Great." It was very efficient.
Okay.
Paul Cheney, Superintendent, Wasco Union School District, only 60%, huh? My question is, and when you go into a new school district, and as you alluded to, you only had to answer to the mayor, and you go into a system that has an existing culture, and as Mayor Johnson said, that if you don't want to work here, move on. How do you go about changing that culture to high expectations when the teachers that are working in that district are servicing a completely different set of kids than maybe they did when they worked there or started 25, 30 years ago? How do you do that?
I love this question, and you've like teed her up on this question. I mean, this is what she makes a living doing, is trying to figure out how to make sure the high expectations that she has or that we have for all children, that is consistent with teachers. And when they don't kind of agree and sign up on that, she is very effective at figuring out ways to help them find a different route.
New career opportunities.
Absolutely.
Under the existing constraints that we have in California with tenure and layoff procedures.
Yeah, it's a tough question. One of the things that we did that we felt was very, very important in terms of beginning to change and shift the culture was to be very clear about the fact that we were going to measure results and measure progress. So the first thing I did when I came into the school district was I sat down with every individual principal and I said, "What are you going to guarantee me in terms of results, achievement results in your school?" And it was fascinating to me because a lot of the principals said, I've never met the superintendent before. I've never been up on the 9th floor. And nobody's ever wanted me to say what my goals were. And I thought, it was just shocking to me that how can you at the end of the school year, if you didn't see the results that you wanted to see as a school district or as a particular school, get mad at anybody for not producing results if you didn't tell the people what your expectation was to begin with, if no one knew what the goal was. And so it was as simple for us as setting the goal school by school and having everybody know that that's what the expectation was. And then every time I would see one of those principals, I mean, I remember early on, I was in the elevator in the central office one day and I saw the principal of a school, and I had just reviewed the data the day before from the first benchmark assessment, and his school was at the absolute bottom. And I said, I just saw the DC Best scores, didn't look good. And he was shocked that I actually knew who he was, that I had read the data, that I had seen. And I tell you what, by the next benchmark assessment, that guy's scores moved. And I think it's because this is an age-old sort of business sort of process or practice that we know, but what gets measured is what moves. And so when you can articulate what specifically your priorities are and what your expectations are, I think that helps to start to change the culture.
I just want to say one thing to your question too, because I mean it's a fair question because you have restraints here. But if you lay out clear goals and you figure out how you're going to evaluate people, and they're going to get exceeds expectations, meet expectations, doesn't meet, or whatever it happens to be, when teachers start to get that environment, they start to either want to do really good, but we create an environment where there's no accountability. We create an environment where you actually don't even know really who's doing a good job and who's not. So if you take California, we have 300,000 teachers in California. Our data in California, we cannot tell who the top 10% of teachers are or who the bottom 10%. So what you typically would want, the top 10%, you want to reward them. You'd want to have them help mentoring the teachers who aren't doing as well. We can't tell who's who. Now, what does that say about California? We wonder why we're at the bottom of the states when it comes to student achievement. So creating that culture ends up helping people say, I don't want to be a part of that, or they start trying to become really good in a hurry. And I think what she did in DC was just fabulous because they were able to get rid of tenure. They were able to get rid of seniority and able to get rid of lockstep pay, which again is a very difficult. She slayed the three dragons in DC, which is very difficult to do anywhere.
Please.
My name is Jason Orda. I'm an alumni of the alumnus of the UC Davis Graduate School of Management, and I've been a resident of Sacramento for 10 years now. I have a question that both of you can answer, and it's basically in regards to lessons learned in your leadership posts. For Ms. Rhee, the question for you is in regards to Dean Currall's statement about having a healthy level of conflict. Now, there is a perception out there, I've never been a teacher, but there's a perception out there that some of your approaches may be the type that would inhibit some kind of collaboration, at least in the form of sharing best practices and good ideas across different faculty members. How would you find that healthy level of conflict, and what have you done to do that? Mm-hmm. And for Mayor Johnson, you've alluded to the difficulties of being a mayor of this city, and I'll use one of the examples of one of your initiatives in terms of the Strong Mayor Initiative. What were lessons learned that you've learned in negotiating with the council and in trying to sell that idea to the people? What were lessons learned from those experiences?
I'd say from my vantage point, it was hard because if the dean says there's sort of a healthy level of conflict versus no conflict, I think that part of the problem in DC when I started was that because there had been no conflict and everybody was getting along really well, even though we weren't producing results, that even the slightest bit of conflict became sort of blown up into more than what it was. So let me just give you an example. Were there some teachers who were unhappy with what we were doing? Absolutely. But this is one interesting data point. Through my first 3 years, I was trying to negotiate this radical new teachers union contract with the union leadership, the Washington Teachers Union. And you know, people all throughout the media sort of hyped this up as, you know, sort of the battle of the titans, and, you know, we hated the union, that sort of thing. I actually got along very well with the president of our teachers union, and, you know, we had to do a little sort of fighting for show or whatever, but we liked each other, respected each other quite a bit. But the national AFT, who was also involved in the negotiations, what they would always say to me was, oh, you know, that's fine that you want those things, but there's no way we're going to get that by our membership. And at the end of the day, after 3 years of negotiation, when we finally put this on the table, it passed 80% to 20%. 80% of the teachers were absolutely with us. Had no problem with the increased accountability for the increased rewards and recognition. So, you know, I think that the 20% of people who weren't with us and the fact that they were really loud, it created a dynamic that wasn't sort of a holistic picture of how the vast majority of people in the district felt.
I think in terms of, where's the gentleman who asked the question? Way in the back. I think in terms of the Strong Mayor Initiative, that, you know, Michelle talked about this earlier. She said that it was easy for her in DC to do some of the changes because it was the worst school district in the country. In Sacramento, we are kind of progressing along in a way that's okay and not too bad. And when things are like that, it's very difficult to do something very extreme. So if you want a strong mayor, like if you're being politically smart, you only do strong mayor when there's a crisis, there's a scandal, or somebody's going to jail. When you take something as polarizing as changing the governance structure in a system like Sacramento, it's just not going to work unless you have something extreme happening. So think about this, because you asked me, how can I convince my colleagues? So when I ran for mayor, I ran against the establishment. I ran against the incumbent mayor. I ran against all the council members who all supported the incumbent mayor. So I didn't have that support going into office. And right when I got elected, I said, I would love to have Sacramento have a governance structure where the mayor is accountable, where the buck stops somewhere. If he does a good job, great, and if he doesn't do a good job, you throw him out. How in the world can you have an environment where a city manager runs a city and has 9 bosses that he's trying to make happy every day, and we wonder why we don't get things done? It's just a wrong environment because everybody points the finger. But I couldn't get my council members to, at least at that point, think that this was a good idea. And what I was trying to challenge them to do is, whether or not you thought it was a good idea, why not let the public vote on it? Why not let the people decide whether they'd like to see this governance structure be changed? I was very confident that if the public got a chance to vote on it, they would have passed it in an overwhelming way. I could not get it on a ballot where the public could vote on it. So government is not going to reform itself. It's not what it's inclined to do. So what we did was we came up with a ballot initiative, got the necessary signatures to qualify for a ballot. Then that initiative got sued by labor, and a judge that was a labor judge said it wasn't constitutional, that we were wrong. So then what that leaves you is a system where you can never do things to challenge the current governance system in a city like Sacramento unless all the council members are willing to do it. I just don't feel that's not democracy at its best, and it's been very challenging. When you think about cities our size, 400,000 or bigger, 70% of them have this governance structure. When you have a city manager form of government, it's when you're a much smaller city and you can do things by consensus. But when you need to make decisions, hold people accountable, we've all talked about the importance of human capital. So for me, I can't choose an economic development. I can't choose a chief of police. I can't choose a group of people that I think would carry out a vision and take Sacramento from here to the next level. It's very difficult, very frustrating. It's what I signed up for. I do plan on running for re-election. I haven't announced it yet, but I do plan on running for re-election. And one of the things, I want to be very clear to the public that I would like to run and have this be part of my platform. This be the governance system that I think would be in the best interest of Sacramento. And if people want it, then elect me, and I will do my best to have us be an effective city within it. And if you don't want it, then don't elect me and elect someone else. I mean, I think the public deserves an honest dialogue and I'm very confident in the smarts and the prudence of our community.
Because I think most people, I mean, we are obviously together a lot around the city, and I don't think that people in the city, for the most part, know that there is a weak mayor structure. I didn't even know what it was. When he first told me about it, I said, no, honey, let me tell you how a mayor works. Mayor gets to do this, and he's like, no. I had to look it up on the internet. And when I looked it up, I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. This is who can run a city like this? And because people come up to him all the time, they say, Mayor, we need more of these things. We need more of this. You need to do this. And Kevin is a good sport, so he's like, yeah, we're going to work on it. And people do not know that it is illegal for him to give direction to a city employee, to tell a city employee to do something.
Do you guys hear that?
I don't know if you know that or not. He is not allowed to give a city employee direction. So how could, but I think that people, believe that when you elect someone as mayor, that they have some kind of authority to do something that you want them to do. And that's why I think that it is important to educate the public about the current governance structure and the fact that a man that probably most people don't even know who he is and what he does every day is actually making these decisions on a day-to-day basis without any accountability. I think that is a discussion that the city has to have.
Well, we could go on and on all night long, but we can't do that because of time constraints. So I'm going to allow one more final question. So take us out in a blaze of glory.
First of all, thanks to the both of you for participating, and thanks to Dean Currall for hosting it. I can't imagine you thought Strong Mayor was going to come up tonight, but he's handled it like a sport. This question's for the both of you.
Tell us who you are.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Daniel Seneca, and I'm a consultant for a Sacramento-based nonprofit called the Institute for Advancing Unity. And I'm curious to know if you've experienced or seen any initiatives that focus on improving school climate, that have a measurable impact on improving a school's academic performance index, or just in general improving the academic performance of the individual students. And second, if the most effective of those programs are more peer-led, or if they're administrative, zero tolerance type policies.
So I'll say a couple of things. First, the research is very clear that the one factor that has in school that has the most impact on student achievement levels is the quality of teachers in the school every day. And this is an interesting statistic. An economist did a study that basically showed that if we in America took the bottom performing 6 to 10% of teachers and replaced them just with average teachers, that we would propel the country from where we are now, near the bottom on math, et cetera, to near the top, just with that one action. So that shows you the power that teachers have, and I think people often underestimate how incredibly difficult it is to be a great teacher. There is, in my mind, no job that is more important in this country than our public school teachers. We don't pay them enough, we don't recognize and reward them enough, but I believe that we've got to be focused a lot on that. I'd say the second thing in terms of school culture and climate, and the mayor can talk about this as well, because this is something that they did extraordinarily well at Sac High when it was a failing school, is instead of the way that we ran things in DC when I first got there was very reactive, right? So in schools that were the most troubled, where you would see the most discipline problems, et cetera, we'd put more police officers there. And it was my student cabinet who came to us and said, do you all think that having more police makes us feel safer? Because it actually doesn't. It makes us feel worse. And so what we tried to do was start pilot programs where schools could take some of the money that we normally spent on these police officers and these security guards and actually put them into proactive strategies, peer mediation and conflict resolution and the things that would proactively help kids to figure out how to work through problems before they turned violent. And working on some of the social skills and the ability to do that, we thought was just a better investment of money.
So I'll just have a simple answer. In thinking about leaving this group here, you hear us talk about leadership and human capital. You hear us talking about culture, how important culture is, and how important data and accountability and results. You know, that's what we just believe so strongly in. So when I think about an environment, I think about the culture you create, and it really starts with kids that have high expectations. You have to have really high expectations for kids at the end of the day. You have to believe every kid in every neighborhood can do equally as well as any kid in any neighborhood if they have access to high quality education. That's not happening in our country. We don't want to make excuses. Don't use poverty as an excuse. All that's hogwash. It just is not accurate. We have kids in Sacramento right now, Oak Park, 95% African Americans are outperforming kids in Granite Bay right now because they have great teachers, high expectations, longer school day, and they believe. If you go outside our kindergartner's door right now in PS7, it'll say 2027, the year they're graduating for college. There is no doubt in their mind that they're going to college, and no one can tell them any different. They've been to UC Davis probably more times than I've been to UC Davis on a college trip. I mean, seriously. So that's part of the high expectation. The other part that's important is this notion of choice and commitment. You have to create accountability and commitment from everybody. So at this elementary school, we have a three-way contract between a parent, between a teacher, and a student. And they all sign this contract of what they're going to do. Homework, longer school day, can't watch TV until you take care of your business, always tell the truth. That notion of accountability and commitment is really important. So I'm in a what do they call it, Blockbuster? I'm in a Blockbuster, is that what they're called? I'm in a Blockbuster, what do they call it? I'm in a Blockbuster movie rental place. And I'm walking around trying to find a movie to pick. And this parent comes up to me and she goes, "Are you Kevin Johnson?" This is before I got elected mayor. And I'm like, maybe. Yeah, thinking about what the, so she's, "I know you are." She's yelling at me from across this Blockbuster. So finally she goes, "I send my kid to Sac High, your high school, and I used to like it and I don't like it anymore." You want to know why? And I'm like, please. She goes, my kid got suspended. My son got suspended. And at this point, I'm not going to be able to enjoy my movie at this point. So I'm like, "So why did your son get suspended?" "My son got suspended just because." No. Why? Tell me why your son got suspended. "Because he was wearing a hat indoors." It's okay. I said, "Let me ask you a couple questions. Is there a rule in a student handbook that says your son shouldn't wear hats indoors?" "Yes." "Did you not sign that commitment to say you're going to follow all the rules that are in that handbook?" "Yes, we did, but this is different." "Okay, what's different?" "He just shouldn't be suspended for wearing a hat indoors." "Is it the first time he was told not to wear a hat?" "No." "Second time?" "No." "Third time?" "No." I said, let me just make it really simple, and then I'm going to go watch my movie. If you think it's more important for your son to wear a hat in school than go to college, then I would take my kid out of school. Parent was like, "You know what, that's a great point. I can't wait to get home and tell my son how dumb he's being for wearing." The point is, parents want high expectations for their kids. If you allow them to get away with breaking stupid rules and not even holding them accountable, then they'll do it. But once you tell a parent, if wearing a hat is more important than going to college, I understand that. No parent wants that. So while she's talking about, what Michelle talked about, at the end of the day, it all boils down to high expectations as well. And that's kind of the culture that we need to create. And I think it's the culture we're trying to create in the city of Sacramento. We don't want to just be a normal city. We want to be a world-class destination city. And oftentimes I get in arguments with people who, sometimes feel like they're not ready for it. And I'm just not going to allow that to be the case. We want to be capital of California, and we want to act like it, and we want to sit up straight and make people understand what that means in Sacramento.
So I hope you agree with me. This has been an absolutely riveting discussion, listening to the leadership lessons of both Michelle and Kevin. So please join me again in thanking them for all their insights. And we have two little tokens of our appreciation to you. One is UC Davis vinegar and one is UC Davis olive oil. So those are from us, thanking you very much for being with us. And I just wanted to thank you all again for coming tonight. It's been a terrific event. This event will be on our website. The video from it will be on the Graduate School of Management's website by early next week. So I just want to now invite all of you to stick around. We have reception and food and drink in the back. So please join us. And again, thanking Michelle and Kevin for their remarks. Terrific.